For over 2 decades, the royal vault beneath Windsor Castle remained sealed, protected by layers of protocol, silence and secrets. But just 2 minutes ago, something unprecedented shattered the royal code. The vault has been opened, and what was discovered inside threatens to upend everything we thought we knew about Princess Diana, the monarchy, and the line of succession. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. No one expected the unsealing of the royal vault to happen on a quiet winter morning. Yet within minutes of its heavy doors opening, whispers began echoing across corridors of power. Was this triggered by a legal mandate, or was there a quiet but urgent health scare that forced the crown to act? Official palace sources remain tight-lipped, but leaks from within have already started painting a picture far more complex and far more damning than anyone anticipated. Those first inside the vault were hand-selected aides and trusted archivists, but even they appeared visibly shaken as they emerged, some with pale faces, others barely able to speak. Something inside that vault had changed everything. The royal vault, for years shrouded in mystery, had long been rumored to hold more than just royal heirlooms and ceremonial garments. It was said to contain files, correspondences, and sealed personal items that had been tucked away after Diana's tragic death. Sources now confirm that a significant portion of the vault's contents were not only from her personal collection, but were deliberately hidden from public scrutiny. And the timing of this discovery, just as questions around succession and internal power shifts swirl, could not be more incendiary. Security cameras outside the vault captured what the palace hoped would remain unseen: emotional exchanges between senior staff members, frantic calls made on secure lines, and boxes being carried out under armed escort. The Crown's attempts to impose a media blackout failed almost immediately, with leaked photos and a short video snippet making their way to independent press sources and royal insiders. The footage, now widely circulated behind closed circles, clearly shows the royal insignia on several sealed envelopes, and what appears to be a signature, Diana's. In the hours since the vault opened, a new wave of tension has spread through the monarchy. Not only do these revelations threaten decades of carefully maintained public image, but they also risk unraveling the very narrative the royal family has spent years controlling. Insiders are already whispering that what was found directly challenges Charles's reign, casting long shadows over decisions made following Diana's death. More explosively, they hint that the contents of the vault may elevate William in a way that was never intended to happen, at least not yet. But what lay beyond the steel doors wasn't gold, jewels, or crowns. It was something far more dangerous, the truth Diana left behind. Inside a worn, sealed envelope was a letter, its ink faded but unmistakably Diana's. Dated just weeks before her fatal car crash, it was marked to be read in the event of a betrayal. What she wrote was never meant to see the light of day, until now, as gloved hands lifted the fragile parchment. From the vault's cold interior, the atmosphere among palace staff shifted from curiosity to sheer disbelief. The letter was intimate, unmistakably written in Diana's distinctive hand, its tone both desperate and deliberate. From the very first line, it was clear this wasn't just a mother's memento. It was a message of warning, a cry from a woman who knew her time was running out. She detailed names, some veiled, others alarmingly direct, of individuals within the palace she believed were orchestrating her downfall. Her words carried an eerie clarity, painting a chilling portrait of paranoia that, in hindsight, was justified. Diana confessed she felt watched, even in her own home, and feared that every step she took was being measured by those who wanted her gone. She didn't beg for protection. She demanded it for her sons. The letter referenced gifts of truth, items she had hidden away across separate locations, clues and pieces that would someday help William and Harry understand the machinery they were born into. She described moments of surveillance, where her calls dropped inexplicably, where her car brakes failed once in Paris, and where familiar faces suddenly turned cold. Her instinct screamed that betrayal was no longer a possibility, it was already in motion. What left the inner circle of staff shaken, however, was the letter's reference to a specific royal insider. Diana never named them directly, but she left enough clues to suggest this person was someone close to the monarch, perhaps even part of his daily council. This mysterious figure had vowed to preserve her legacy if the unthinkable happened. She pleaded for this person to keep the truth safe until the were. LD is ready to hear it. That truth, it seemed, had been sleeping in the vault all along. By the end of the letter, even the most seasoned palace aides found themselves emotionally unmoored. One reportedly left the archive chamber in tears, unable to speak. This wasn't just a document. It was a mother's final shield for her children. It was an accusation carved into history. It was proof that Diana had felt that the very system she once trusted might ultimately destroy her. And yet, that letter was only the beginning, because beneath it was something even more explosive, wrapped in velvet and time, locked in a steel box marked only with the initials SDW, were a series of cassette tapes. Not copies, originals. Diana's voice, preserved from beyond the grave, speaking not to the press, but to her children. And the monarchy may never recover from what she said. What began as a letter of warning suddenly transformed into a direct transmission from a woman whose truth had long been silenced. The tapes, labelled in her distinct flowing script, carried chilling titles. For William, If I Disappear, and most heartbreakingly, My Side of the Story. These weren't public statements meant for media manipulation. These were private, unfiltered confessions, recorded when Diana knew her time might be running short. On the first tape, her voice trembled yet held a fierce clarity as she spoke to William, calling him my light, my Lionheart. She urged him to remember who he was beyond the crown, beyond duty, beyond the image others would try to sculpt for him. She warned of palace figures who had already begun shaping his future behind closed doors, some of whom had done the aim to her, manipulating every move and eroding every ounce of freedom she once had. Each recording grew darker in tone, revealing layer after layer of betrayal that Diana had endured. She named individuals with brutal honesty, describing how they twisted her public image, isolated her from allies, and branded her emotions as instability. She did not shy away from confronting her own flaws, but she made it clear the true machinery of the monarchy had chewed her up, and it would do the same to her sons if they weren't protected. Her recordings outlined a contingency plan, one she had been quietly building for years. Tapes stored, letters hidden, trusted friends sworn to secrecy. She had no faith in the system to protect her children. So she built her own shield, voice by voice, truth by truth. The most emotional tape, labelled only H, was reserved for Harry. Her voice cracked as she pleaded with her youngest to resist the gravitational pull of royal expectation. Do not follow the crown, she said. Follow your heart. That is where your truth lives. She told him he would be tested not by enemies, but by those closest to him. Her words were not accusations, they were warnings. They were a mother's final attempt to guide a son through a labyrinth of shadows. And then came the final recording, the most haunting of them all. In it, Diana speaks with eerie finality. If they silence me, my voice will still rise. I have made sure of it. With that single line, the entire royal vault took on new meaning. This was no mere archive. It was a battlefield, a chamber of buried truths, and the war Diana had been fighting in life was far from over. But Diana's voice wasn't the only presence. In that vault, what came next was a document no one thought had survived. Buried in a folder marked Private Sovereign Revisions was a single page, an amendment to the royal line of succession. It had been removed from official records, but Diana had a copy. And this forgotten clause could change who inherits the crown. Among the vault's ancient parchments and ceremonial trinkets, this document was the most unexpected and the most politically dangerous. It wasn't a personal note or a keepsake. It was a formal, typewritten amendment, drafted under confidential authority in the early 1990s. The language was unmistakably official. The header bore the imprint of the Royal Advisory Council, and at the bottom, clear as daylight, was the royal seal. This wasn't hearsay. This was real. It detailed an emergency succession protocol, activated only under circumstances where the reigning monarch was deemed compromised or unfit to ensure stability, and at its core was a clause unlike any seen before. granting specific oversight to the mother of the future sovereign during times of constitutional crisis. In other words, Diana was meant to hold a form of legal guardianship over the monarchy itself should certain conditions arise. The revelation sent shockwaves through the small group of officials reviewing the vault's contents. Why had this document never been acknowledged publicly? Why had it vanished from archives? And most importantly, who orchestrated its erasure? The answer, though unspoken, hung heavily in the air. Diana had clearly anticipated this very betrayal. The fact that she had secured a personal copy and hidden it so carefully suggests she knew it would be buried, ignored, or destroyed by those who feared what it meant. She was not simply leaving behind memories, she was leaving behind leverage. What's more, the wording of the amendment subtly undermined Charles's position. If enforced, it could have paused, or even redirected, the royal succession. It raised a haunting question. Was Charles ever the secure heir he appeared to be? Or had the crown been built upon a document that someone desperately wanted to forget? The legal implications are staggering, but so too are the emotional ones. This wasn't just a mother planning for her children, it was a woman outmaneuvering a system that had failed her. Even as palace spokespeople scrambled to deny the document's legitimacy, its presence in the vault among Diana's most protected possessions gave it undeniable weight. Senior aides tried to discredit it as a forgery, a misunderstood draft, a policy that was never enacted. But the seal was authentic. The language matched archived royal legal formats, and most critically, Diana believed in it enough to preserve it in the one place they never thought to look. And yet, the most soul-piercing discovery wasn't legal or political. It was something deeply personal, something Diana meant only for her sons. A dusty mahogany box was retrieved from a side alcove of the vault. Inside, not just jewelry but messages, ownership tags, and a clear directive from Diana herself. What she intended for Catherine, and what she demanded Camilla never touch. Among the whispers of succession, tapes of warning, and constitutional revelations, it was this simple wooden box that delivered one of the most emotionally loaded blows. Its hinges creaked open to reveal an array of familiar treasures, bracelets, brooches, tiaras that many assumed had been catalogued, gifted, or quietly absorbed into the royal collection years ago. But what stunned investigators was that each piece had a note, meticulously handwritten by Diana, attached like a seal of intent. These were not casual gestures. They were declarations of legacy, carefully preserved, and, until now, deliberately hidden. Each tag bore a name, a purpose, a meaning. Some were marked for her sons, others for close friends, but the ones that carried the most weight were those inscribed for Catherine. One brooch in particular, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, was labelled in delicate blue ink. To Catherine, you'll know when the time is right. There was no ambiguity in these notes. Diana had chosen her recipients with clear affection, and her intention echoed across the decades. Notably, not a single item in the box bore Camilla's name. In fact, one tag attached to a delicate pearl necklace read bluntly, "Not for her." It was a quiet but powerful rejection from beyond the grave, a denial not just of possession but of permission. And yet, several of the items within the box had already been seen on Camilla in recent years, worn at state dinners, offic, IL events, and private ceremonies. The contradiction was now impossible to ignore. How did these pieces end up in her hands? Were they taken, reassigned, or absorbed through bureaucratic sleight of hand? The implications have ignited whispers of a legal firestorm. Royal historians and legal analysts agree, if Diana's wishes, documented in her own handwriting, were knowingly bypassed or erased, the royal household could face an inheritance dispute of unprecedented scale. And more than that, it's a question of respect. Catherine, who has worn Diana's memory with quiet grace, now finds herself caught in a symbolic tug-of-war between past and present, legacy and image. The box tells a story the public was never meant to hear of favoritism, foresight, and unresolved betrayal. This wasn't about jewels. It was about Diana's final word on who she believed would carry her torch forward. Her choices were intentional, emotionally charged, and now undeniable. And while the palace may attempt to downplay the contents of this box as sentimental relics, the truth is clear: Diana was still speaking, and her message had just reached its audience. But it wasn't only Diana's past that the vault revealed. It may have exposed the monarchy's future, and it centers on one young heir. Tucked into a folder marked Legacy, George, were notes, articles, even a sealed prediction letter written by Diana. The contents point to one undeniable truth. Diana had envisioned Prince George as more than a king. She saw him as a revolution. In a vault overflowing with echoes of the past, it was this single file, carefully labelled and deliberately preserved, that turned all eyes toward the future. Diana's notes inside were not fragmented or emotional musings. They were structured, deliberate, and laced with purpose. She had outlined a vision for a monarchy that would evolve, not reign. In George, still unborn at the time of writing, she saw something England had never seen before: the possibility of a monarch shaped by love first, tradition second. Her words spoke of a crown guided not by protocol but by conscience. Diana feared that if nothing changed, the shadows that consumed her would eventually devour her grandson, and she was determined to prevent that. She wrote directly to William with chilling urgency, warning him of the institutional traps waiting for George. "Raise him with heart, not crown," she pleaded. "Let him know who he is before they tell him what he must be." It was clear she understood what royal life did to young souls. She had lived through it herself and watched its cruel toll on her own sons. But George, she believed, could be the one to break the cycle if given the freedom and protection she never had. Among the papers, untouched and now quaking with relevance, was an envelope marked simply for George. It was sealed, undated, never opened, and it carried the full weight of Diana's hope. A letter written from the past to a future she would never see. Those who read her other notes hesitated, debating whether the young prince should receive this message now while the firestorm is still raging, or wait until the exact moment Diana had silently chosen. But no matter when it's opened, its existence already reshapes the narrative. George is no longer just the next in line. He is the embodiment of Diana's unfinished mission. There were even subtle references to a guardian Diana trusted to help guide George when the time came. She never wrote a name but left enough clues to suggest it was someone royal, yet grounded, possibly Anne, whose quiet strength Diana had admired from afar, or perhaps Sophie, whose gentler presence had made her a silent ally in Diana's later days. These breadcrumbs painted a story not just of succession but of spiritual inheritance. Diana wasn't simply passing on jewelry or letters, she was trying to pass on wisdom, forged from pain. This wasn't prophecy for the sake of poetry. This was a mother, desperate to leave behind a blueprint of freedom in a cage built from gold. And as George grows beneath the weight of two legacies, one royal, one revolutionary, Diana's voice now echoes above both. As the palace reels from these discoveries, attention turns to one question no one can escape: was Diana's death really an accident? Inside a locked case marked MISC files, red was a chilling discovery: photos, transcripts, and letters that suggest Diana was being followed far more closely than anyone admitted. And one redacted document implies a deadly cover-up. This wasn't a forgotten collection of loose papers. It was an archive of surveillance, detailed, time-stamped, and disturbingly invasive. Tucked inside the red-labeled box were photos taken in 1996 and 1997, some mere weeks before Diana's fatal crash in Paris. Some were taken in London, others abroad. They showed Diana entering hotels, dining with friends, even walking alone in gardens once believed to be secure. It quickly became clear this wasn't paparazzi work. These images bore the markings of professional tracking, with precision angles and notes in the marg. Several of the files originated from private intelligence sources, while others, unmistakably, had government agency headers, most notably MI5. A few were heavily redacted, but the context was undeniable. Diana had been monitored, methodically and without her consent, but it went deeper than photographs. Bundled within the same case were transcriptions of phone conversations, many intercepted, some dated just days before her death. In them, Diana's voice quivers with anxiety. She spoke of feeling surrounded, of not knowing who to trust. One call to a close friend revealed her certainty that someone is listening. Another message contained a bone-chilling line: "They'll never let me go peacefully." Yet no formal investigation ever acknowledged this level of surveillance. Until now, these records had been buried sealed in a vault where truth was meant to be entombed alongside legacy. Among the most disturbing discoveries was a typed, unsigned letter slipped between two envelopes. Its message was short and blunt: "Stop what you're doing or suffer consequences. The Crown will protect itself." No name, no return address. But its meaning was as sharp as a blade, and beside it, a separate memo, titled Pre-Action Briefing, suggested that Diana's upcoming travel plans and public appearances were being mapped not for coordination, but for potential interference. Analysts studying the document have noted the language as operational, not administrative. And one section, partially redacted, makes an oblique reference to an intelligence directive dubbed Protocol K, a rumoured covert unit long thought to be disbanded, or worse, erased from royal records entirely. The fallout inside. The palace has been swift and silent. Aides are scrambling to contain the damage, issuing vague denials while reportedly attempting to block dissemination of the vault's contents. But the pressure is mounting. Public outrage is growing. If Diana was being followed, monitored, threatened, and ultimately silenced, then the question is no longer whether something went wrong, but who allowed it or ordered it. But one vault room remained sealed longer than the others, and when it opened, it revealed a betrayal that no one could have imagined. Inside a small lockbox labelled "For My Boys," when its time was a confession written by someone close to Charles. It details a conspiracy, regret, and a final plea for forgiveness. What it admits will destroy royal trust forever. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, restrained, an echo of the composure expected within palace walls. It bore no full name, only a set of initials, but the tone, the knowledge, the confessions within made one thing clear: this was someone who stood close to the throne. Someone who had been there when the decisions were made. The letter opened with an apology not just to William and Harry, but to Diana. Acknowledging betrayal in the most intimate terms, it recounted the early days of tension, the meetings behind closed doors, and the growing fear that Diana's influence over the public was becoming a threat to the structure we swore to protect. The author admitted to assisting in the suppression of Diana's letters and recordings, removing them from internal archives, delaying legal action on her estate, and even influencing which journalists received briefings aimed at discrediting her. The darkest admission came without embellishment. A coordinated media campaign, orchestrated by senior aides and discreetly sanctioned by higher authority, was designed to portray Diana as emotionally erratic, unreliable, and unstable. "We had to control the story before she controlled the Crown," the letter read. "That was our instruction. We executed it with precision but not without consequence." The writer's tone shifted near the end, collapsing under the weight of guilt. They confessed to standing by when critical choices were made, choices that spiraled far beyond spin and narrative. "I should have stopped what was set in motion," they wrote, "but I didn't. And I will carry that until my last breath." Perhaps most heartbreaking of all was the way the letter turned to William, not as a figurehead, not as a future king, but as a son. "You deserve the crown, not the shadow of guilt that was placed upon you," it read. "What was taken from your mother was also taken from you, her voice, her truth, her protection." And finally the last words scrawled in trembling ink: "Forgive me. I thought I was protecting the crown. I didn't realize I was helping destroy a mother." With that final confession, everything changed. This wasn't just a conspiracy, it was a collapse of conscience at the highest level. One of their own had broken ranks, pierced the silence, and exposed the cold machinery behind the monarchy's greatest tragedy. This wasn't meant for public eyes. It was left as a time bomb of truth for Diana's sons, when the moment came that the truth could no longer be contained. And now that the vault has been opened, and the words revealed, there is no turning back. The betrayal is etched into history, signed not with a name but with the weight of a shattered loyalty. And now, as this avalanche of revelations crashes through Buckingham Palace, the world asks only one question: what happens next? The vault is open, the world is watching, and the monarchy stands at the edge of reckoning. Diana's secrets are no longer whispers, they are thunderclaps. Will the royal family survive this storm, or has the age of truth finally arrived? Within hours of the vault's contents leaking into the hands of independent journalists and digital platforms, Buckingham Palace was forced into silence. No prepared statement could counter the emotional force of Diana's words, her recordings, her warnings. The truth, once entombed, had exploded across the globe. Public outrage surged as fragments of Diana's final letter, surveillance evidence, and that heartbreaking cassette labelled for William made their way into headlines. Social media erupted. Protesters gathered outside palace gates not with rage, but with mourning for a mother stripped of justice, and for sons left to inherit a crown shrouded in betrayal. Lawyers were quickly summoned behind the palace walls. There was no choice now but to reassess the legal boundaries of Diana's estate, the documents long denied legitimacy, and the constitutional implications of the succession amendment she had hidden away. In the eye of the storm stands William, no longer shielded from the truth his mother tried so desperately to preserve for him. Reports describe him as visibly shaken by the confessions, the sealed instructions, the velvet-wrapped reality that the very institution he's destined to lead may have been complicit in his mother's erasure. But amid the chaos, something else is emerging: resolve. Those closest to him say this is no longer about titles or tradition, it's about redemption. For Diana, for truth, for the future of the monarchy. The revelations have also reignited an uncomfortable spotlight on Camilla. The jewelry tags, the omitted bequests, the letter's chilling phrase "not for her," have all led to calls for a re-examination of her place in the royal hierarchy. What was once tolerated as historical revision is now viewed as royal rewriting. And as the public reclaims Diana's narrative, the tide has turned. Support for Catherine has swelled, positioning her not just as William's wife, but as Diana's true spiritual successor, a figure of empathy, integrity, and grace who now carries the burden of a legacy born in suffering. And while the crown has weathered scandals before, this is different. This is not an attack from outsiders. This is a rupture from within, a reckoning driven not by scandal, but by suppressed truth. The monarchy now finds itself standing at a precipice, not of public opinion, but of moral authority. Its crisis is no longer about perception, it's about purpose. Can it survive the weight of the secrets it tried to bury? As the dust settles, only one thing is certain: Diana's voice, long buried, has risen again. And it may change the monarchy forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.